Following the Prime Minister, he's in London, Ontario today, a housing announcement, but a lot of questions there, particularly from the French media. Unfortunately, we didn't get much in English, but about Trudeau's own future. Remember, the party is sagging in the polls, the Prime Minister himself personally doing badly in the polls, at least when you compare to the Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre. Answering in French, saying he's focused on his job. He doesn't plan to go anywhere, at least anytime soon. The French media there also asking about how some MPs off the record sort of raising questions about Justin Trudeau's future, saying in particular, he did very well for us back in 2015, but maybe now it's time for him to go. Remember, the next federal election, you heard the Prime Minister there say it, about 2 years from now, which is a eternity plus another eternity in politics. Let's bring in CTV's Rachel Aiello, who's standing by in Ottawa. She was listening into some of that. So let's talk about, if we can, the future for the Liberals. A lot at stake here for them. Big caucus meeting going on in London, Ontario. And no doubt some people are a little uneasy with where they stand in the polls these days, Rachel, and perhaps some of them blaming Justin Trudeau.
That's right, Todd. So we've been hearing from Liberal MPs in the lead up to the caucus meeting. They'll actually go behind closed doors later today. And housing and needing to communicate their policies better were really the main focus. So we're hearing from a number of MPs recognizing that the polls have them down this summer, but they're really acting resilient to that, saying they're not concerned. And really what they need to do is better communicate what they're already doing. And I think what we just watched, Todd, was their first attempt at that. So we were told earlier today that this housing announcement from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was going to be essentially their first plank of their new housing plan. And what it actually was the first announcement of what is going to be a series of announcements across the country as part of this Housing Accelerator Fund. So, Todd, this is an announcement that was first made by the Prime Minister, a commitment in 2021 during the election. The $4 billion for it came out in 2022. He launched the program earlier this year, and now we've got London as the first city who signed on a deal. And essentially, they're trying to frame this as the first step towards a number of these agreements. We'll see province or municipalities and cities across the country rolling out this accelerated housing funding, helping to cut red tape. But it's an existing program. So if this is the first plank, they may want to reshift that communication a bit more, Todd.
Yeah, so Trudeau's saying, look, I've got a lot more work to do, certainly not giving any indication that he's even considering stepping down in favor of a replacement ahead of the next election as well. Housing is key, and it's certainly a message that the Conservatives, Rachel, as you know, following closely in Ottawa, have been able to maximize lately. They sort of have a very simple and clear message about how there is a housing crisis in our country, and after 8+ years of the Trudeau government, we're still in this, and it's in fact only getting worse.
That's right. And we heard from Sean Fraser some new wording this morning that I'm going to be interested to hear if it continues. He essentially said when the Liberals came into power, the need for housing was around low-income social housing, but now it's for middle-class Canadians. So they're trying to pivot and recognize that the federal government needs to be seen doing more for all Canadians. And that is really the message that Poilievre has been sharing. They've also, the Conservatives, kind of seized on a comment that one of the Liberal MPs made to Judy Trin last night, saying that she has been unable to buy a house. She's an MP with, I think, $195,000 salary. So the Conservatives have really pounced on that, saying, it's so bad, the housing situation is so bad that even an MP with a salary that high is having issues. It's kind of a problem coming home to roost. So it's going to be interesting to see when the House of Commons returns next week, how those battle lines are drawn, what kind of conversations we're hearing thrown across the aisle between an invigorated Poilievre after a strong summer and this Conservative gathering last week in Quebec City, and Trudeau coming out of what's going to be him likely getting an earful from some frustrated Liberal MPs at this caucus retreat.
Yeah, and one last thing. I mean, there's also the question for the Liberals, Rachel. It's actually quite simple. If Trudeau were to leave, then who, right? I mean, who would actually take over and be effective and be able to sort of rebrand the Liberals and give them a shot at winning the next federal election? I mean, if the trend lines continue, what we're seeing right now, that's also an open question.
It really is, and I think it's going to be curious to watch how that kind of plays out, because the Prime Minister essentially rebuilt the Liberal Party in his image after he won in 2015. It truly had become Trudeau's party, and there are many ways that he's put his stamp on it, and we would expect to see, I think, the Prime Minister signal or tap who he would kind of condone or support as being the next person. Obviously, we had chatter over a number of years about whether Freeland, as Deputy Prime Minister, would be stepping into that role. Now there's some suggestions she may not be eyeing that anymore. Jolie Fraser, now as Housing Minister, is stepping into a high-profile position. So it'll be interesting to see who steps up, but it's always a political risk, Todd, to have a party go into a leadership race, because that's when all of the airing of grievances and internal squabbles start to arise, and it just generally doesn't look good for a party. We've covered the Conservatives going through that now twice in the last couple of years. So I think that's a factor as well. The Prime Minister probably wants to stay and fight, and if he doesn't, there is a risk as well that the party could still not kind of recover following his departure so close to the next election.
Yeah, we know he's an effective campaigner. Often when the odds are against him, he's able to pull things ahead for his party. Good to see you, Rachel. Thanks for this great stuff as always.